Great. Hi, Egle. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for your contribution to this interview and session, just to help really keep people up to date with what's going on in AI, and specifically how that relates to learning and development. And up to now, I think a lot of the conversations about AI and learning and development have focused on either designing learning, maybe some stuff around data analytics to find out about learning needs, etc., and also about obviously creating content. We still see quite a lot of focus about people using AI to create content. How do you think that's set to change from the conversations that you've been having more widely?
Yeah, so the way I like to think about it is that L&D has largely been thinking about AI from its own perspective. So here are our most demanding tasks, and how can AI make them easier? But the reality is that L&D doesn't exist in a vacuum. Knowledge work itself is changing because of AI. And what L&D has been doing is has been focused on solving its internal problems, its processes, and making its own life easier. And it hasn't questioned enough if it's still solving the right problem. So, for example, AI can help you create a good branching scenario, but do people still need to practice, for example, feedback giving using a branching scenario when AI can give you a simulated real-time conversation using your own voice? And we have a similar situation with content in courses. So, aside from instances where it's either needed for compliance or where people are starting from zero and they need some orientation about the scope of the topic, so they're kind of new to the topic. Do you still need that meticulously designed SCORM course where you can click things and read stuff when people are just going to ask AI? Let's be realistic.
Yeah.
And that is the new habit. That is the new interface for knowledge work. And uh, it also changes the expectations for how contextual, how personalized and relevant information should be to earn someone's attention. So courses aren't L&D's core artifacts anymore, they're data, and that changes the value that L&D can offer to the business. So when we're looking at this whole AI and L&D conversation, I feel like we're having two conversations, or we should be having two conversations. There is currently the loud conversation, which is about how do we use AI tools in L&D for our own purposes. And there is another conversation, which is much more silent in comparison, which is what L&D needs to become to keep adding value in a workplace that has AI in it.
Yeah.
Essentially, what happens to L&D when knowledge isn't the bottleneck anymore?
And I think that transformation of organizations, albeit slow in some areas, and I think we've got to kind of acknowledge that reality as well, that transformation is happening. And organizations and the way that work happens in an environment which is facilitated by AI or people have access to their own AI tools has radically changed. So what needs to shift for L&D to move from that focus on their own processes to that focus on the wider issues of individuals having AI tools at their fingertips and being able to use them, sometimes more than others, recognizing that there's a bit of lumpiness in terms of the adoption of these tools. But how does L&D's role need to shift to acknowledge that that change is happening in a way, whether or not that's been strategically mandated by the organization or not? It is happening. People are using their own AI tools if the organization doesn't provide them. So what does L&D need to do around that?
So I think it starts with a leadership vision, frankly. I'm talking about the L&D leadership. And that vision usually comes from having a point of view on the future of work and L&D's place in it. And what
Mm.
that means is about understanding what this technology can do, how it's going to change your business, not just L&D, not just your team, how it's going to change the business, because it matters what industry you're in, what is your overall business strategy, how the business and various business functions imagine that they're going to be using AI in their workflows. So you need to understand that. You need to understand um, what value you can offer when you merge the changes that are happening in the business, then unique skill sets and purpose and like whatever configuration you have, like L&D has in your organization. And Yes, this means that L&D leaders need to be comfortable with AI to get a feel for it. They need to get outside of L&D and engage with AI initiatives across the business, and this is how they form that point of view, which starts everything. Because the way I like to think about it is that what's been happening a lot, and I think this is what's been making people feel quite overwhelmed about all of these developments with AI, is that people start with where they are, and then there is this new AI update, and they suddenly try to think about, okay, what does that mean for us? How can I use this new tool or capability or whatever, instead of starting from, okay, so I kind of have a point of view on the direction, at least for the next, say, 2, 3 years.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's uncertain, but let's be honest, nothing is going to be certain for a long time now. So like
No,
you have to
no.
deal with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And going instead of from where you are, little steps directed by every single AI release every week towards a vision of where I want to be and what will add value in the business 2 years from now, which means that you are much more capable of directing the resource, the vision, the everything, the strategic relationships in the business, and pretty much you can start setting something up because it's very difficult to go towards these more sophisticated AI uses if because it requires so much build. This is not just using an AI system for learning design.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're going to talk about these more sophisticated uses, but it is pretty much impossible to move towards them without being aligned with the business and plugging into the wider organizational strategy. So to give you a few examples of what that might look like. So what does it mean um, when a leader has a point of view? So one one leader said that you know what, with this new way that AI is used in our business, of just like what I'm seeing in happening in the business, like bubbling up, our LMS is going to be irrelevant by next year. It's a database now, essentially. So our storefront, meaning the L&D storefront, and how we communicate with employees and how employees see us fundamentally changes. And that means that we need an AI interface which helps people navigate our offering. So essentially, we're putting a lot of things in the back end, and we are adding a whole new interface between us and the workforce, which gives us real-time data signals and pulse of what's happening in the organization and what people need. So that's one direction, but it's not the only one. So, for example, some of the other case studies that we actually had in the report with Don Taylor, and actually
Yeah.
they have been visible for the past few years, is where learning leaders realize that people are now using AI to create their own learning programs and performance support tools, completely circumventing L&D. So they have reimagined L&D's purpose as capturing that bubbling knowledge and initiatives and making sure that these good practices spread. Again, a very different operating model for L&D. And it all starts with noticing what's happening with the business, kind of
Mm.
understanding where the business is moving, and then thinking about, okay, in my particular context, what does L&D need to become to keep adding value?
And interesting that you talk about that because I think there was a case study which you had in the report, and it's also someone who spoke at the World of Learning 12 months ago, um, from Leighton, where they were talking about individuals building their own agents, and really what how AI spreads then across the organization becomes the core feature of what L&D's role is doing. I think that contrasts with what I see in some organizations, which is that L&D are maybe working on AI things, but as soon as they move it up the organization, it becomes an IT initiative. And how do we address that organizational imperative, that real strategic desire to change the way we do things, from it being, some kind of computerization project which happens over there and then is landed on the organization? Clearly, some organizations are doing that, but what happens when the natural instinct of the organization, the people in the functions, is to, oh, well, that's IT, let's go and talk to them about it?
Yeah, so I feel like there are two ways to answer this question. The first way is quite directly, what happens when a leader, an L&D or people leader, has this imagining of what employee support might look like, but suddenly it becomes part of IT's remit. Like, what do you do, right? And that's what happens. This is information work. This is technology work. So of course, IT is very heavily involved in pretty much all the organizations that I've seen. But I think it's important to recognize that there's a difference between L&D's span of control and span of influence.
Yeah,
L&D probably will never be able to control IT implementation, but it can have influence. So, for example, Leighton's example that you just mentioned, uh, he James, he collaborated very closely with technology and trying to understand what they were creating so that they can piggyback on that.
yeah,
There's another case study as well where I the L&D leader explicitly formed a collaboration with IT so that they had kind of a hybrid team so that they can start building that interface, that like the new storefront for L&D, so that it is integrated with everything else that the organization is doing. So yes, there are ways. It's not about L&D's control; it's about L&D's influence, and I think that mm, that gets us into this whole conversation about how does L&D get influence and what kind of influence it has. But it comes down to that practically. And the other way to answer your question, which is about let's say those were the concerning news that I just just explained. But the good news is with this whole IT versus people transformation is that any organizational transformation or any technology-driven organizational transformation has essentially two sides. It has the technology side and it has the people side, right?
yeah,
And the people side of AI transformation in particular, it includes people's ability to work with the new tools. Of course, this is, I think, where a lot of that like starts and ends. But there's also people's ability to do the jobs that have changed or will change
yeah,
due to AI, arguably becoming more complex and intense once AI automates some simpler tasks. It also is about maintaining the talent pipeline and preventing de-skilling due to AI,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because there are like second and third order effects for using AI in the workforce. And I think it's only recently that not even us as an industry, I don't think it's coming from the industry, it's coming just from the, I guess, business community that they started talking about it. So L&D hasn't talked about de-skilling that much due to
yeah,
AI.
no,
And then there's this whole part about supporting people through fear, through uncertainty, through this threat of their work identity changing. And
yeah.
um, that takes us into this whole manager and leadership prep territory. So wherever you look at the people side of AI transformation, L&D has levers to pull, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that that leadership role becomes really important. And I'm interested in where you've seen examples of L&D being able to kind of move the leadership perspective on a little bit to get them to think more widely about AI and to think of it outside of the box, if you will, as a real transformational tool. How have you seen L&D teams and L&D leaders successfully managing and navigating the organization where perhaps there's a bit of wait and seeism or people are kind of hanging back or not quite sure where to go or what to do to start to be an agent of change across the whole organization to see the principles, the possibilities, the potential that AI gives them to change the jobs that people do, but to achieve the strategy of the organization more effectively. So it's that nexus of yeah, we cannot carry on doing the same things in this environment. How have you seen L&D leaders drive that agenda forward for organizations where it's been successful and they've started to get the benefits of some of that transformation?
Do you mean when the senior leadership of the business wants AI implementation, but it is lagging, or when there's a bit of it's the whole thing is wobbly, so that leadership is a bit on the fence?
I think it's very definitely where I think the latter, where the whole thing is wobbly. Leadership are a bit on the fence, maybe not quite aligned in terms of the different areas of power within the organization about where they're going on AI, and some of them will be going, well, it's all going to change in a few months' time anyway, so there's nothing to lose by waiting. And L&D are going, no, hang on, we need to move on this. We're not just going to keep putting people on courses, and we're not just keep doing things the way that we did before, because there's new things that we can do more efficiently, more effectively, achieve capability better, improve capability more efficiently and more effectively, and in a more timely way. That whole change requires an organization to have at least some sort of the vision that you were talking about for 2, 3 years' time. And I think a lot of organizations, particularly when it comes to the use of AI, are reluctant to place a bet, if you put it that way, on where things are going.
Yeah. This is a bit of a tricky situation because we have to be realistic about what L&D leaders can control. Because the blocker of business leadership being wobbly on AI is it's something that shouldn't be underestimated. We have to be
Mm.
realistic that L&D is never, well, never is a strong word. I haven't seen L&D being the one leading the organization's AI strategy.
No,
And if it doesn't have a strategic directive from the business, from further up, if it doesn't get the budget for tools, if it doesn't have governance figured out, which takes sometimes over a year,
sure.
um, or if it doesn't have the support in rolling out AI tools or, God forbid, workflow redesign, it's a tricky place to be. So yes, L&D can keep pushing. The L&D can keep doing what it has been doing, which is, learning design, content process improvements, being more efficient and agile as part of the business. But I don't think that the L&D leader can be the hero in this context, realistically. But what they can do is they can make a business case for AI to the business from the performance perspective. And again, that is if they have enough influence and access to do it at the business strategy level. However, I've seen a few cases where L&D leaders do have that influence and access, and where it is like business leadership is open to being nudged a little bit. And what often works, and this is one of the, I guess, only levers that L&D can pull in a situation where there is no clarity, is to show leaders as part of some other, say, executive program, the value that AI can add.
Yeah.
So integrating it perhaps in a leadership exchange
Mm.
where suddenly leaders feel like, oh, actually, there was a task where I could compare my output and my thinking and my decision making, and got feedback on my decisions in real time almost, and look at the output, right? So I've seen that
Yeah.
recently live, and that made a
Mm.
huge difference for the leadership team to understand that it's not just for emails and so on. And I think that
No.
there's this big gap between leaders who get what AI does and for leaders who tinkered with AI 2 years ago and they haven't kind of updated their
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
understanding. So yeah, so that's one lever that L&D I've seen L&D pull.
And I think you spoke earlier about data being the kind of lifeblood of this stuff, and clearly it's the lifeblood of artificial intelligence. But it is also understanding that how you use data, what insights you can gain, and almost modeling the behavior for the rest of the organization through that's kind of a transition point, isn't it? From looking at L&D's issues and going, actually, we can use data differently, which tells us this, and modeling that to the rest of the business to say, by the way, we used AI to help us to understand that this was the challenge. Would you like to see what we did? That kind of being a model, a soft influence, rather than saying I'm in control, is perhaps where we need L&D to go. Do you see any real immediate untapped opportunities where L&D can use AI beyond that? Here's what we did with the data, into here's how we've moved performance that they could model to the rest of the business to show people how this is what this could do for you if you invested the time and the effort and the budget to get this right and to get the governance of it right.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation because if you want these more advanced AI uses, you need to have put the kind of the effort, the strategic impetus, the budget and everything, and time behind it. So L&D doesn't kind of usually create this thing in secret and then show something really well devised as an example. Again, it's a bit of a kind of influencing commercial acumen. Like it's kind of it builds. But speaking of opportunities with AI, I like to think of it of just like this whole AI opportunity in L&D because I'm often asked like what do you think is like the best thing that AI can do for L&D? I
Right.
like to think about it as five distinct opportunities that AI offers L&D. So the first one, and this is where L&D plays in a lot, which is content. So being more efficient, improving our workflows. If used a bit more strategically, you can say that that improves L&D's efficiency. So it's not efficiency, agility. So it's not just
Yeah.
about creating content faster. It is about being able to react to the signals from the business that we're getting faster, which is qualitatively a different use of fast content creation with AI.
Mhm.
So one level up, we have using AI for practice, which is about the simulations, coaching, dynamic feedback that help people build real skill and learn on the job essentially. And I think right now, one of the big shifts from 24 to 25 has been that a lot more L&D teams are now playing in this practice territory. But these two, content and practice, they are the two AI uses that play within the existing paradigm of
Sure.
L&D does. And then there
Sure.
are three more, which I call uh, like AI uses that transform the system. So the first one is evolution zone, and the second one is transformation zone. And the three opportunities are memory, context, and intelligence. So with intelligence, like AI-powered intelligence, AI surfaces real-time signals about skills, needs, and behavior, giving L&D the insights to manage skills as a strategic business resource. The second one is context, where AI understands what people are trying to do and provides the support that they need in their workflow. And the last one is memory, where AI captures tacit knowledge from conversations, from documents, so things that are currently in people's heads, that it is kind of unstructured data, and turns it into organizational memory that is discoverable and usable. And when you look at the most high-performing organizations with AI, they have flavors of each, or at least a few of these. So if you can imagine, if you have some kind of intelligence, and it doesn't have to be the super sophisticated skills intelligence, like any way to understand what's happening in the business. It might be done not through technology, it might be done through relationships, through listening, through various processes that you have to collaborate with parts of the business. But if you have that, you can give people visibility and directionality. Essentially, here's where you are as an individual, as an employee, this is where you need to go to succeed. And that enables people to start what I call bubbling.
Yeah.
So if you have the right culture in place, once people know where they are and they have the direction, they will have this, you kind of create the motivation to pursue performance improvements to reach those goals, right? So once you have that, then and then, for example, you can use AI for memory, which helps capture the bubbling up, the tacit knowledge. It might be something that people share in meetings, in online spaces. It might be something that actually happens in training, where you can actually use AI live. There are some pretty cool tools where as a facilitator, you can see in real time what is emerging from the conversations across, 10 breakout rooms, right?
Mm.
And make it part of organizational memory. So So intelligence kind of unlocks it, and you have memory which captures it. And then if you kind of again play your cards right, then you can have this context where people feel empowered to innovate, to do their jobs better, right? So they innovate their workflows. They work with AI to teach it their particular context, to teach it their tasks, and this is where agents come in. So essentially, uh, it's kind of like once you tap into some of these, they start building onto each other. And I've seen that in the high performing organizations with AI, L&D organizations with AI, they have flavors of each of these, and it
Yeah.
ends up as a self-propelling machine, essentially.
And that's really important, but there's a world of pain potentially to go through to get there. And I think one of the challenges that I see with a lot of transformations, and this is almost out with the world of AI, but it's particularly focused at the moment around AI being used within organizations, is that I see companies still going through the additional rather than alternative. So they're adding things on, but nothing ever gets taken away. So there's a kind of real painful process where people are really, really busy and having to make headspace to experiment and to try things out and to have a play with the tools that are available to them. And that's particularly true, I think, where organizations have got some kind of enterprise license to. And the one that seems to be coming up an awful lot is Copilot, yeah, because people have bought Microsoft 365 and then they've gone, oh, well, we'll upgrade it to include my Copilot 365 as well. And now you've got an AI tool, off you go. What does the learning team do to help reduce that pain, if you will, to share that knowledge, to enable people to have space to experiment, but also to not constantly reinvent the wheel because they're all doing it in these little pods of individuals or small groups. And how does L&D navigate that area of the workplace?
Oh, so there are again things that are within L&D's control, and there are things that are hopefully within L&D's influence
Mm.
as part of the kind of people team. So the th let me go for it. Kind of let's peel the onion here in real time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the first thing with experimentation is, of course, that you need to create the surface area for people to experiment, which
Sure.
is you need to give people some baseline knowledge so they feel that they know roughly what they're doing. They're not intimidating by opening whatever AI tool, right? Um, where again, if you want to if you want for that bubbling of innovation and initiative to happen, you need to kind of light the fire.
Yeah,
You need to engineer that environment. So one of these things is yes, you create a surface area, which means yeah, baseline knowledge, making sure that people feel comfortable around these tools. Then when it comes to experimentation, there we go into a bit of a kind of social learning. And again, we're talking about engineering environments. So experimentation is it's not enough for people to experiment. You need to capture that experimentation and to create conditions for it to for people to build on each other's work.
yeah,
Um, so what that means is that instead of having some tinkerers, like super enthusiasts somewhere in the corner doing their own thing, L&D, and in this case, I would say that one thing it needs to do, it needs to find a way to understand where that thing is bubbling up. So how do they spot it? It might be that they work through HRBPs or some other business contacts in the business. So essentially, there's an infrastructure for listening. Then there is uh, how do you create these spaces where people meet and share? So it might be an asynchronous space, it might be a database where people share and rate their top prompts
yeah,
or use cases and workflow designs or the how-tos. It might be a ritual, a lunch and learn on Friday afternoon, what you have done. It might be a formal ritual so that after every project, there is a debrief about anything that people have, where people can reflect on the innovations that they have created, again, creating these things. So again, we are going back to the basics, like not the basics, the fundamentals of how learning happens in
Yeah,
as part of work.
yeah, yeah. And how change happens as part of work as well. I mean, there's the fact that it's AI seems to dazzle people a little bit, but actually it's change. It's change and transformation, moving on and doing things better than you used to do them before. And some of the same rules, the essential truths of how change happens and is embedded in organizations are the same almost regardless of the fact that we're now working with artificial intelligence to make some of that change happen or to use artificial intelligence as an output from that change. I suppose that's really brings us back down to our kind of core audience, which is we've talked about L&D needing to have influence, and it would I infer from your comments earlier that their ability to understand AI, to recognize what it could do, what it can do, where people may be resistant, where it might scare people to death, etc., 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 is part of that piece, so that they are ready when the organization says, "What do we do about with some kind of answer, some kind of response to help guide that strategy?" Is there are there other skill sets that you think the L&D team will need to develop, need to be working on now to enable them to fulfill the sorts of roles that you've talked about within those different contexts?
Yeah, so the way I think about it at a high level, L&D professionals need three deep verticals of expertise. So the first one is learning. So how learning works at a fundamental level, the processes and context that enable learning to happen, because only then will you be able to understand what AI uses in L&D are actually value add and in fact where humans are uniquely needed. Because we know that content does not equal learning, it does not equal skills. But unfortunately, a lot of a lot of AI uses have been around content
Mm,
so far. Not saying that
mm,
all, but like too many,
mm,
I would say. And I think that comes from the fact that the uh, the knowledge of how learning happens, it is still missing in L&D. It's a bit of a like I would say L&D needs a bit of more professionalization
yeah, yeah, I
in this
agree.
field.
I think it's a blind spot. I think you're absolutely right on that. That idea of how learning happens needs to be something which is fundamental to this for sure.
Yeah, yes, and it's a bit strange that we even have to talk about it. We're talking about learning and development.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so that's the first vertical. The second vertical is technical, because there is this, of course, massive part of L&D professionals that absolutely love everything to do with AI. They love tinkering. But then on the other hand, I keep finding myself in situations and places where people are still quite at a basic level. And then we have the situation of unknown unknowns where people did an AI training a year ago and they think they're all set. They don't know what they don't know, how things have moved. And some probably even feel that they're set with a bit of relief because
Yeah,
technology isn't something that they are particularly fond of or comfortable with. And because they got into this profession to do people work.
yeah,
And I think it's essential to accept that the profile of L&D roles or the nature of value add L&D work has shifted. And it's not just mostly people work plus some additional authoring tools and LMS, but essentially we're all about kind of people. We're people.
yeah,
It's knowledge, process, and intelligence work as well,
yeah,
or it will be where it's moving
yeah,
in my
yeah.
opinion. So that's the second vertical, and the last one is commercial. So we have learning, technical, and commercial. Most of the highest value L&D work with AI is joined at the hip with the business. So
Mm,
we have always talked about putting learning in the flow of work. Well, now it's literally in the workflow. And
yeah,
we
yeah,
didn't even have to do anything about it. People
yeah,
just put it in the workflow by themselves. And if someone needs support, they ask AI or they work in collaboration with AI tools, which of course often changes the required capabilities for the task. And L&D can either meet people there and anticipate how their work will change. They can anticipate the support that people will need and execute on it, or its value proposition is untenable frankly, which means
Mm.
that you need to understand the business, you need to understand the work that people do, you need to know how functions are planning to use AI so you can support those workflows, and you need relationships and influence in the business to make this all happen. So this is what I mean by commercial skills. Like L&D leaders or just all L&D
Yeah,
people should see themselves not as just L&D people. They should see themselves as part of the business, and especially leaders, not L&D leaders, but business leaders who have this remit in performance. Because notice that in too many situations so far, well, not all, maybe not even the majority, but too many, the business didn't come up with an AI strategy and think, well, we better bring in L&D because AI is massive for performance, and L&D as performance specialists will help us stick the landing.
yeah,
Instead, what they often thought was, well, AI is massive for performance, therefore we don't need these content people anymore.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think there is a big shift. I was reading Dr. Phil Hardman's Substack just the other day, and the unit the course is not the unit of value anymore within L&D. That idea of we're going to shift things. Can I ask you just to look into your crystal ball then for a moment, Egle, if you wouldn't mind, and just think about, well, okay, so 3 to 5 years hence, what does the L&D team look like in a world where people have taken the appropriate advantage of the potential which AI offers them? What does that team do, and what services do they provide to the organization?
Yeah, I need to dust off my crystal ball because usually I'm resistant to looking at it 5 years, 5 years in the future. I'm not brave enough. Um, there, I would say that there is no one future operating model for L&D, or at least it's not clearly visible yet. But it's clear that L&D needs to shift its identity, and from our search with Dawn, it seems that three identities are emerging right now.
Mhm.
The first one is what I would call maybe like skills-based identity, what we call skills authority in our research,
Yeah,
where L&D organizes itself around superior insight into business critical skills and its ability to target them precisely.
yeah,
There is a knowledge-based identity, what we call the enablement partner, where L&D sees its role as capturing, organizing, and scaling expertise that's already in the business. And then there is the systems-based identity, adaptation engine, where L&D works with other parts of the business holistically to address the environments where performance happens beyond the traditional remit of L&D. And sometimes the composition of the L&D team or the collaborations, such as deep integration with, say, IT or digital teams, like something that is still quite rare, but this is something that is emerging. So we'll see where that will go.
Egle, that's been an absolutely fascinating conversation, and thank you very much for your insights and sharing your the bits around the research that don't necessarily make it into a research document, which is always massively interesting to me to find out what's really going on. So, thank you very much indeed for your time. Cheers.
Thanks so much, Robin.